The truly religious man has nothing to do but go on with his life as he finds it in the various circumstances of this worldly existence. He rises quietly in the morning, puts on his clothes, and goes out to his work. Every one of us is one day born into this world. The instant that happens, we are able to perceive reality with our senses. We are able to see the things around us, even though we don't know what any of those things are yet, even though we don't know what they're used for or why they are here. As we grow older, we become conscious of what surrounds us. We grow to understand the things of the world. Now we know that a house is called a house, and that its use is protecting us and making us comfortable. Now we know that a car is called a car, and its use is to get from one place to another quickly. We learn logical understanding. We learn that everything serves a purpose. But one day we ask ourselves, what is my own use? What am I here for? I wake up and I go to school. But why? So that I can get a good job. But why? So that I can have a family one day. But why? It seems like any reason we have for doing anything can be reduced to a simple why, and the answer to that question is nowhere to be found. We become conscious of the fact that we're all going to die one day. We are guaranteed to one day lose everything that we have gained over our lifetime. In the face of that fact, all of the effort that we put into our lives seems futile and unreasonable. People have been aware of this logical paradox of human life for a while now. Amongst the most popular representations of it is the myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus got punished by gods for his evil deeds. He had to push a boulder up a hill. However, once he was almost at the top, the boulder would slide back to the bottom of the hill, and it would be so for eternity. Now, how does that represent our lives? After all, we do not live for eternity. The main similarity between the case of Sisyphus and our lives is the fruitlessness of it all. Why would he keep pushing the boulder if he knows that it's going to fall down anyway? Similarly, why would we keep living, keep trying to improve our lives, if we're all going to die anyway? A quite popular and sensible question we may ask is, why didn't Sisyphus just stop pushing the boulder? Consequently, we may ask a similar question about our own lives. Why don't we just stop living? Why don't we just end it all? Sisyphus chose to keep pushing the boulder. Some sources say that he simply believed in himself. He believed that he could make it to the top, no matter what anyone may say. Logically speaking, Sisyphus was a fool. Why would anyone ever do anything that they know for a fact is going to fail? Consequently, all humans are fools. After all, why would we struggle every day to live on if our lives are guaranteed to end one day, and all that we ever do will be forgotten in the grand scheme of things? Nevertheless, let's say that against all odds, on the 10 billionth try, Sisyphus made it to the top. He would most likely achieve levels of happiness, gratitude, and fulfillment that are hardly imaginable. He would sit down next to the boulder with a huge smile on his face. But still, after some time, he would ask himself, what do I do now? All of my dreams have come true. I have achieved the impossible. But now that the feeling of accomplishment has worn off, I no longer have anything. I wish I could go back to pushing the boulder. Back when I was doing that, life used to be so much more simple. It seems that we humans are naturally built in a way that makes us dissatisfied no matter what we do, no matter what we have, no matter what we achieve. If we were in Sisyphus's place, we would say, why do I do this? There is no point to this. And even if we finally rolled the boulder to the top, we would say, what do I do now that I've made it to the top? I feel empty. As said before, logically, life doesn't make any sense, because we will all die anyway. So, let's say that we had eternal life. Now everything we do is here to stay forever. So, we are finally motivated to do things, right? Not really. Now that we have eternal life, there is also no reason to do anything. It is simply because we can always do it tomorrow, and then tomorrow, and then tomorrow, because we have an infinite amount of time. So, if Sisyphus keeps pushing the boulder, his life is pointless. Even if he makes it to the top, his life is still pointless. Also, if the human life is guaranteed to end one day, it's pointless. And even if it never ends, it is pointless as well. This is what happens if we put logic over everything else. We arrive at all these conclusions from the logical point of view. But now, let's ask ourselves, why should we put logic over everything else? Well, because it makes sense. Why should we care if it makes sense or not? Before, we have established that every reason we may have for living can be destroyed with the question why. But now, we see that every reason for following logic in the first place can also be done away with by asking why. Logic has its limits. The only real reason to follow logic is because it makes logical sense to do so. It is the same as saying that you should eat apples because they're apples. That is not a real reason to do something, unless you simply want to. Logic is not perfect. It has inconsistencies, paradoxes. Still, it is really helpful when building rocket ships or building our lives. But before we dismiss all existence because of logic, it's good to know that reason is not omnipotent. Our brains may ask the question, why do anything? However, we may reply, why ask that question in the first place? We don't need to take everything our thoughts say seriously. Actually, let's explore why we have thoughts in the first place. A quite reasonable explanation is that we have evolved to have them. Research says that animals have thoughts as well, except the human brain is much more complex. But still, evolution is the source of conscious thought. And what is the purpose of evolution? Survival. Our brains have evolved in order to help us survive. That is why we have thoughts. That is how we learned to recognize patterns and predict outcomes. We called those skills logical thinking. But after some time, we started to believe that reasoning is the solution to every problem, and that it is more important than other faculties of humanity, like psychology or biology. This is one of the main points made by Zen Buddhism. Logic has so persuasively entered into life as to make most of us conclude that logic is life, and without it, it has no significance. Zen wishes to show that we live psychologically or biologically and not logically." End quote. The first thing one should know about Zen is that it doesn't treat logical reasoning very seriously. We like to think that the things we do and say make objective sense. It is only natural. It gives us a sense of comfort. That way we prove to ourselves that we are doing the right thing. We often manipulate logic in order to make ourselves feel better. For example, people who struggle with alcoholism often say that they don't, and that they could quit at any time they wanted, while in reality the substance is destroying their lives. This is an extreme example, and its goal is not to criticize people, but make all of us realize that what we call logic is subjective. Our reasoning is influenced by many factors, like our upbringing, natural tendencies, and the situations we find ourselves in. Therefore, our subjective experience of life, our personality and character are actually superior to reason. That is why Sisyphus kept pushing the boulder. A lot of people would call him a fool for that. However, that perspective changes once we understand that character is what creates our reasoning, and is, therefore, superior to logic. Sisyphus didn't listen to reason, which is essentially a voice in our heads. He was stronger than that voice. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. Making it to the top was his goal. He refused to budge, no matter how unreasonable it was. His strength of character was everything that he needed. Oftentimes, our logical brains ask us, who are we? What are we doing here? If we try to answer those questions logically, we will never know who we are. It is simply because we are more than logic. We are more than our thoughts. Sisyphus understood that. He had something that can never be gained by reasoning. He knew exactly who he was. This man that is called a fool by many, he, out of all people, has what we all want and need most. True peace of mind. He doesn't need to worry about anything. All he has is himself and the boulder. That is what Albert Camus meant in his famous quote. The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. End quote. Notice how Camus says, fill a man's heart. He doesn't say answer all of his questions or make him understand reality. Humans are not logical creatures. Even if we logically understood the whole universe, it still wouldn't satisfy us. What we truly need are not answers, but something to fill our hearts. Now the question becomes, how to find that something? Zen Buddhism teaches that in actuality, most of us, if not all people, already know what we want to do. We already know who we are. We all have that one thing that we always wanted to do. But what stops us from living our lives are our thoughts, our ego, our overly logical outlook on life. We are scared of being criticized. We are scared to struggle and make mistakes. All of this fear comes from our thoughts, or rather, our attachment to the thoughts that we have. Hence, Zen teaches the doctrine of no mind. It is a teaching based on the principle of no attachment. Our problem is that we hear a thought and get attached to it. We immediately take it as the undisputable truth. Detachment is the ability to hear a thought, notice it, and let it be, while we go on with our lives. The daily practice of meditation is a great start towards detachment. Human life is a paradox. We seem to know the use and purpose of everything around us, but we do not know why we are here. Logically, human existence doesn't make any sense at all. If we're here just for a time, and all of this will end, why do anything? Even if we were here forever, still there is no reason to do anything, because we can always do it tomorrow. Following this line of thought, we are all fools. But there is this one man named Sisyphus, who is the biggest idiot of them all. What Sisyphus is doing doesn't make any logical sense, but he still does it, because of the power of his character. It shows us that logic is subjective, and that our personality, who we truly are as humans, is superior to reason. We do not need a reason to live. The fact that we were born and that we haven't died yet is reason enough. We do not need logical answers to our logical questions. All that we need is something to fill our hearts, and that something is already within us.